In today's video, I will be attempting my hardest challenge yet. Today, I will be attempting to survive 100 days in Minecraft, but with the Witherstorm. The Witherstorm will progressively grow throughout this 100 days, becoming bigger and bigger and even stronger. Will I be able to defeat the Witherstorm and save this Minecraft world, or will I fail? And if you guys want to try this challenge yourselves, all you've got to do is download the Crackers Witherstorm Mod. The link will be down in the description. So without further ado, let's find out if I can survive 100 days in Minecraft versus the Witherstorm. So I started by loading into the world. I gathered up as much wood as I possibly could, as I knew after I summoned the Witherstorm I wouldn't have a lot of free time. So I made up a bunch of stone tools and got straight to work, murdering as many sheep as I possibly could, as I knew I was going to need all the resources and all the food I could possibly get while I had this grace period. I then found a village, so I headed inside and then took all of the hay, as hay is an easy way of getting a lot of quick and easy food. I then took down the iron golem as well for a quick little bit of easy iron. Then I collected up some seeds as I found a parrot. I wanted to tame it as I needed a friend on this 100 days, otherwise it was going to be very lonely. I then headed out on my boat and found this house in the middle of the ocean. So I headed inside, slept for the night, and then cooked up all of my food. Then I headed up to the roof, and I noticed that there was another set of ladders. So I headed up onto the very top, and that's when I found it. The Wither had a command block inside of it. So I grabbed the Wither skull, and I knew exactly what I was going to have to do. So this was it. I was ready to summon the Wither. I jumped up and placed the Wither skull, and the Wither spawned. It looked so different to a normal Wither with a command block inside of it. I knew I had to waste zero time. I jumped straight down, jumped into my boat, and headed out, as I knew that this Witherstorm was going to be chasing me for quite a while throughout this 100 days. After a while, I headed a bit closer just to investigate to see what had happened, and the Witherstorm had already grown twice in size, sucking up everything in its path with these purple beams that it developed. I knew I had no time to waste, so I headed out as far as I could and then found a pack of horses, so I tamed one so I'd be a lot faster on land. I then looked behind me and saw the Witherstorm in the distance. It had now grown some sort of tentacles, so I knew I'd have to hurry. I went exploring to look for a cave that was big enough to put my parrot and my horse in so that I could go deep enough to explore and find as many resources as I possibly could find. Eventually I found a place to stop off and leave my guys, and I wanted to say goodbye, but I didn't want this to be the end. I was hoping the Witherstorm wouldn't catch up to me by the time I was out of the mine, so I was quick. I mined up enough iron to make myself an iron pickaxe and then used the rest of the iron to make an axe and a sword. I then headed down into the mines and gathered up as many resources as I possibly could, while slaying as many mobs as I could as well at the same time. I then continued just gathering up as much ore as I possibly could, as I knew I wasn't going to have this much spare time in the future. I then headed back up to the surface, picked up my parrot and headed back out on my horse. I then found this giant cave while exploring. I wanted to head in as I was looking for one thing in particular, as I knew that if I wanted to live somewhere, it was going to have to be deep underground, otherwise the Witherstorm would catch me and just suck up everything that I'd built. So I decided to go as deep as possible into this cave, and then I ended up finding some diamonds when I'd explored a little bit. The reason that I'd come into this deep cave was because I wanted to find a really big underground cave that I could call my home. After a while I found a really cool place, so I put my chest down and then set up a bunch of torches. I then found a monster spawner which would be perfect for me, as I'd be able to use this in an XP grinder if I needed it in the future. I then brought my horse into the giant cave, and I knew this was exactly where I wanted to live. I then began making a 2x2 staircase all the way up to the surface, which I finally managed to get up to after breaking quite a few tools. I looked around, but luckily there was no sign of the Witherstorm, so this was a perfect opportunity to do exactly what I knew I needed to do. I collected up as many seeds as possible, as I wanted to collect up 2 of each different animal, so I started by grabbing a horde of pigs and a couple chickens too. Then I headed down with a panda and a couple cows as well. Then after that, I then made a dirt path all the way down into my mine, because I knew that I'd need grass down there, and this was the easiest way to do it. I then gathered up another panda that just started doing front flips, and then also grabbed up some sheep. So I now had 2 of each animal that I was going to need to survive this 100 days. I then headed up and remembered that I had a silk touch golden shovel that I'd gotten from a ruined portal before, so I gathered up some grass blocks and then used the rest of the time to gather up as much dirt as I possibly could. I then placed it all down in my cave, along with a couple saplings as well, so that I'd have everything I'd need to live underground when the Witherstorm finally arrived. I then found a giant lush cave, so I decided to head inside to collect up some resources when I found a zombie villager. So I decided to take him home, as having villagers would be an amazing way to get loads of good resources when I'm underground and the Witherstorm has caught up to me. Eventually when I got him home, I put him in a boat to make sure that he wouldn't despawn. After that, I put all of the stuff I'd gathered from the cave into my chest, and then continued placing all of the dirt around my house. And eventually, after placing all of the dirt down, I'd finally completed my cave, and it looked really nice. I then added a little mossy cave up into the mineshaft too. Now, since this video is about the Witherstorm, I think it's time that we go and check on it. And as you can see, it's getting closer to my base by the minute. And now it's grown 3 times in size. It's massive and it's homing in quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if the Witherstorm ended up with me. I spoke too soon. The Witherstorm has finally caught up to me. Around these days, I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what to do. I edged closer and closer up my stairs, but then I could just hear the Witherstorm shooting his fireballs or something. I did not know what to do. I was terrified. If I got too close, he'd end up beaming me up and this 100 days would just be over. I finally peered over and he was massive. I didn't want to take any chances, so I headed straight back down into my base. After getting back down though, I noticed my first issue. My zombie villager was killed. But what I can only assume was the Witherstorm. I'm not sure how. So I decided to continue mining and headed into the mineshaft where I found a monster spawner. I then continued mining ores when another issue happened. I got caught by the Witherstorm's beam. And that was when I realised I was not safe anywhere on this world. So I continued mining all the resources I could possibly find, and then by the time I made it back, the third disaster happened. All of my creatures were out of the cage. They all had some sort of sickness, which I later realised was the wither sickness. The wither had got to all of my creatures, which meant that there was no way I'd be able to farm them for food, and I'd have to use things like wheat to get food. I then checked out my own character and realised I had the wither sickness too, so I could waste no time, otherwise I'd slowly wither away and lose this 100 days. I then found a really cool double monster spawner, which I could again use for more XP if I needed it. I then found a giant cave again, and used it to find as many diamonds as I possibly could. And that's when I had a near-death experience again. I got sucked up by the Witherstorm's beam, but luckily I managed to hang on with a couple blocks on the edge, otherwise I would have fallen to my death. I then used some of my diamonds to make up a diamond pickaxe, and then I found the first fully withered mob. It was a withered creeper. It looked creepy as hell, but I knew I would need more of these if I wanted to complete this 100 days. I then made up a bunch of bread, and then made a golden apple stew, which would help cure me of the wither sickness. If I stayed out of the beam, I'd then become cured and get all of my health back. I then made a nether portal and headed through to the nether, as it is the safest place for me right now. Well, so I thought. I finally found a nether fortress, and then I got ambushed by a bunch of hoglins. I didn't know what to do. I was panicking, but luckily I escaped with 2 hearts left. I then headed back to the nether fortress and defeated all the blazes that I'd need to get all the blaze rods to make enough Eyes of Ender. I then looted a bunch of chests in Nether Fortress and then traded with a piglin to get myself some ender pearls. Unfortunately, I only ended up getting 2. I then ended up finding a bastion where I looted that, got myself quite a lot of iron and gold as well. I then AFK'd a few days trading with piglins, and then this is what I ended up with, all the stuff that I would need to finally make my journey to the end. So I headed back through the portal and then through my first Eye of Ender. I knew I'd have to be quick as the Witherstorm was going to be hot on my tail. Then while I was taming a horse to travel on, I noticed the Witherstorm had become massive and it was homing in on me very quickly. So unfortunately I had to ditch the horse and ended up just travelling on a boat as it was much faster. Eventually I got super close to finding the end portal and the Witherstorm was so close behind me. I was panicking a lot at this point, making mistakes. I needed to be as fast as I possibly could, and as you can see it was getting so close to me. Luckily, the Eye of Ender then changed direction, and I knew I was close, so I had no time to waste. I dug straight down so the Witherstorm couldn't get me. Eventually, I finally managed to find the stronghold. So I headed in, explored for a little bit, until eventually I managed to find the stronghold portal. Unfortunately though, it only had 2 Eyes of Ender in, and after I put my 7 in, I still needed 3 more. So I created a new Nether portal, headed through, and then found a bunch of Endermen. After defeating all of these Endermen, I finally had the correct amount of Ender Pearls I was going to need, and I headed back through to the stronghold. After getting back, I made up the Eyes of Ender, and then put all 3 into the portal. I then prepared myself and jumped through into the end. Finally, I'd arrived in the end. In many Minecraft worlds, this would be the very end for them. Defeating the Ender Dragon is the ultimate goal, but for me, all it was a stepping stone. I started by defeating all of the End Crystals, shooting them all down with my bow, and then I headed to the middle to take out the Ender Dragon. Eventually, I finally managed to defeat the Ender Dragon, getting me one step closer to my end goal. I then collected up all the XP, and then collected up the Dragon Egg. After that, I headed through to the Gateway portal, and entered the rest of the end, looking for one thing in particular. Eventually, I found an End City, made up a shulker box to store all my loot, and then ended up just looting as many End Cities as I possibly could, until eventually I found one that had what I needed, and that was the Elytra. I then also picked up the Dragon Head, and then headed back through the Gateway, and then after I made it back, where I spawned in the end originally, I made a little house in there, just so that I could set everything up, as I knew I would be safe from the Wither in the end. I then made up an anvil with all of the iron that I'd looted, and then combined all of my best armor pieces and my best tools, so I'd have a fighting chance against the Witherstorm when I finally arrived back. I then cleared my inventory, and made sure that I had everything that I was going to need to defeat the Witherstorm. After that, I then filled up a shulker box with some essentials that I might need during the fight. I then quickly farmed up a couple Endermen to get me a bunch of Ender Pearls, and then I was ready. I had the perfect amount of stuff in my inventory, and I headed back through the portal. I searched around and noticed that the Witherstorm was quite far away from me, so I had a little bit of time to prepare myself. And in order to defeat the first stage of this Witherstorm, I was going to need a couple things. First, I made up some firework rockets so I'd be able to power my Elytra, and then I went down and farmed a bunch of creepers as I needed to make TNT for one thing in particular, which you'll see later on. After emerging from my base though, I instantly got tractor beamed by the Witherstorm. I was quite worried as I didn't know what to do. Luckily, I shot at his eyes and he dropped me. I then flew down to the ground where a Wither symbiote spawned. I eventually defeated him, getting exactly what I needed, the command book block. With that, I made the super TNT, and then after that, I made the Formidabomb. Once crafted it, it had 600 seconds before it detonated, so I quickly hurried up to the surface, placed the Formidabomb, and lit it. I then escaped as far away as possible, and then watched as the Witherstorm sucked up the Formidabomb, and then boom, it exploded. All I could see was white, with a loud ringing noise in my ear. Was it finally over? Had I finally defeated the Witherstorm once and for all? I waited for the white to clear, and then I saw the Witherstorm drop to the ground. I thought that I'd finally done it. Defeated the Witherstorm. So I headed up to command block, and then all of a sudden, it awoken. It started setting itself up again. The Witherstorm awoke, but this time there was 3 of them instead of just 1. So I flew away and then headed back down into my base. Eventually I defeated another Wither symbiote and crafted myself up the command block sword, which is what I was going to need to defeat this command block once and for all. After heading back to the surface, I let the Witherstorm beam me up, and then I enderpearled into the head of the Witherstorm, so that I could enter the final boss fight. Finally, I'd made it to the boss room, and I saw the command block laying there. So I went up, hit the command block, and did a quarter of its health. I knew this wasn't going to be an easy fight, so I prepared myself. Everything that had happened so far in this 100 days all led up to this moment. There was no do-overs anymore. This was it. The command block spawned a bunch of withered mobs, and after I defeated them all, I headed back up and got the command block down to half HP. For the next wave, it summoned a bunch of tentacles and a bunch of withered mobs. Luckily though, I was able to defeat them pretty easily with the help of my command block sword. I then went up and hit the command block for a 3rd time, getting it down to a quarter HP. I then had my most difficult challenge yet, defeating so many more withered mobs and the wither skull heads. Eventually though, I managed to swim up to the top of the command block and hit it for the last time, finally defeating the command block. I was then kicked outside of the Witherstorm, and I watched as it exploded. The entire Witherstorm crumbling. I'd finally saved this Minecraft world. I tried to fly up onto a tree to get a better angle, and I just watched as the entire thing just exploded into a massive purple light. I then landed on a tree and almost got myself killed, but luckily I survived on half HP. I no longer had the wither sickness. It was finally over. I saw up in the sky there was the withered Nether star, so I headed up and collected it. I'd finally saved this Minecraft world, and so that is the end, guys. The Witherstorm was no match for me, but gravity was. I wasn't defeated by the biggest threat of this world, I was defeated by myself. It's ironic, really. So I looked over the world for the last time, saw the withered Nether star sat there just alone on the tree, untouched by anyone. And I looked over the Minecraft world that I had been on for 100 days, completely destroyed by the Witherstorm. Everything in its path had been ripped up to pieces. So if you guys did enjoy this video, I had a ton of fun making it, so make sure to show your support, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.